placed this item on the agenda back at the first meeting in December. And because of our schedules, this was the first available meeting to put it on. And I'd like to cover a few items just briefly before the council gets into discussion. And we have the Fire Chief, Tom Weber, is here, and I see some other individuals that are here that may be able to answer questions that you may have. First, the current model that we are using is called the dual response model. And when I say dual response model, it is that the fire and rescue departments respond to emergency medical calls as well as evac. Okay. When it was put in place several years ago, and I see Chief Ertz, former Chief Ertz, is sitting out here, and he probably remembers when they did that at that time, is that the whole idea is to have fire and rescue responding to the medical calls, and because they would always be the closer unit to handle the emergency medical calls, and then the evac unit or the emergency transport system would come in and pick up the patient and move it to the hospital. What we have found over the years is there have been several modifications made in the particular response program and then response protocols. When we started, you would find basically units within a single jurisdiction responding to the calls within those jurisdictions. And I'm talking about from an emergency medical standpoint. Over the years, Volusia County has changed the ordinance to today. It's called the closest unit first response methodology. So regardless of jurisdictional boundary, a fire rescue unit on an emergency medical call is now required to cross into another jurisdiction if they are dispatched to respond to that call. The dual response model is a very effective model because at its base, it looks at placing what is often referred to the right vehicle, the right response unit at the scene the quickest. But what we have found over the period of time is that that is not exactly what occurs. What we're now finding is that more resources than may be absolutely necessary are showing up on the scene. So it may not be the most cost-effective model, or it may be the most effective, but it may not be the most cost-effective. When you begin to look at studies that have been done on fire services and a variety of other types of issues over the years, you would go back to the first study was done in 1984 as it looked at what was the most cost-effective way to provide fire and rescue. But not only fire rescue, it looked at a variety of other items, including consolidation of the local governments. The voters in 1986 voted that down, and with that, they also voted down any discussions about any other types of combinations at that particular time. If you go through and you begin to look at what was in the base of that study, it said that fire and rescue services could be provided on an area-wide basis at a lower unit cost. It also went through the discussion about that was without sacrificing services. After that particular election, a number of the local governments came together and said, well, let's look at what's called functional consolidation. It may not be governmental consolidation, but it may be functional consolidation. Then let's look at the variety of services that are being offered, and can those actually be combined and then put together in certain ways. In fact, our own fire chief was recognized by the Halifax Area Chamber of Commerce in 1987 as leading that particular study, and again the results were basically the same, is that the cost could be provided, or the service could be provided at a unit cost that was lower than was currently being provided without sacrificing any of the response times or any of the service levels that were there. Discussions continued for several years until 1998. And then it was former Ormond Beach Mayor David Hood came to the Volusia Council of Governments and said, can we look at that functional consolidation model one more time? And fire service was one of those that were selected. There were several others that were looked at that particular time, including data processing, including parks and recreation, including other types of services that were being offered by cities all across the area. This council actually participated in that particular study, and former mayor Dorothy Huckel actually represented the city of Port Orange in that particular study. And she actually chaired the Fire Services Subcommittee of that particular item. What was interesting as you go through the particular mechanics of the study, you would find that the mechanics just verified the previous studies that had been done. That there could be cost savings achieved without the diminishing of the service that was provided to the residents. And let's skip forward to 2002. Is that once again there was a discussion within the area. Is there a more cost-effective model that local governments could use in providing certain types of emergency services? And in fact, fire services was the area they looked at, and what they found was the same thing. Tri-Data came forward and said, if you look at the service model that we are providing, there are other models out there that could provide the same level of service at a lower unit value. And when they were talking about these items, they were talking about the full range of services. They were not necessarily talking about just fire and rescue or just emergency medical response. They were talking about all of the elements, including ambulance service, the whole 9 yards, so to speak. As you begin to move forward, about that same time, the city of Port Orange, Edgewater, and New Smyrna Beach did something that people have been talking about for a number of years. Is actually, there have been a lot of talking about how do you bring emergency dispatch services together. And that had been one of the major discussing points. And for years, nobody would get off the wire. And so at that point, the city of Port Orange, the city of Edgewater, and the city of New Smyrna Beach came together, and we said there's a better model as it relates to emergency dispatch service. In fact, Shannon headed that study for the 3 cities when she was with the city of New Smyrna Beach. So as we went forward, we combined the emergency dispatch systems of Port Orange, Edgewater, and New Smyrna into one center that now handles all of our emergency calls. Kind of interesting, soon after that, there began a discussion on a county-wide basis, which has now led to many of the cities coming together and providing a dispatch center that is similar and not exactly